Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Now, I am one of the people out there that has a favorable view of Jalen Milroe and do think that he is a fit in the Browns system. And when I say that, that tends to garner a bit of a response from some folks because they don't believe Jalen Milroe to be a fit. And I got a comment on something I posted on social media that I felt like wrapped up a lot of the sentiment that I can understand about why people would instinctively hear Jalen Milroe, Cleveland Browns, and think it's a terrible idea. This tweet is from Dion Owens, who responded to me and said, let me get this right. Kevin hated to run the RPO spread, and now Cleveland is going to draft a RPO QB in Milroe. The math isn't mathing on this. You have two fundamentally sound QBs in Ward and Sanders, which I would heavily disagree with Cam Ward being described like that. But Sanders and Kev will pass on them for a DB and a D lineman, even though Cleveland's biggest issue is QB play. What? All right, so this is somebody who still wants to draft the quarterback at 2. I think there's some flaws in his evaluation of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, but that first sentence is really the one I want to focus on, or at least the second sentence. Kevin hated to run the RPO spread, and now Cleveland is going to draft a RPO quarterback in Jalen Milroe. And one, I would say Cam Ward is also a very heavy RPO quarterback as well. I would argue he played in offenses that were way more RPO reliant than Jalen Milroe did. And I would argue that Shedeur Sanders played in more RPO reliant offenses than Jalen Milroe. A lot of people, when they think of RPO, they just think of the run part, right? But what Jalen Milroe ran a lot at Alabama wasn't RPOs. It was just read options, right? Where he can pick the attack point, mesh point, see the read, and then pull the ball or give the ball to the running back. There wasn't a ton of RPOs in the offense for Jalen Milroe at Alabama. What he did run, he ran well, but like if you watch Cam Ward's tape, I think 30% of it is RPOs. I think a good percent of Shedeur Sanders' tape is RPOs. So one, I don't think I would categorize Jalen Milroe as a RPO quarterback. I understand how that misconception can happen because usually we associate the term RPO quarterback with athletic quarterback, and those two things start to become similes in people's minds, but not every RPO quarterback is an athletic quarterback, and not every athletic quarterback is an RPO quarterback. Jalen Milroe will certainly run some RPOs in the NFL, and that will certainly be in the cards for him if the Browns draft him. But it's not all of what Jalen Milroe did in college, and it's not as much of his playbook as it was for other quarterbacks who you aren't considering RPO quarterbacks, right? So, like, if you want to know what an RPO quarterback, like in what I believe you're trying to define those terms in, or maybe you just mean a read option guy or somebody who runs a lot of read options. Again, Jalen Milroe didn't run as much read options as I think you're assuming. Like Jackson Dart, and the hesitation a lot of the draft community has with Jackson Dart is because he ran such a heavy RPO offense at Ole Miss. It makes it hard to evaluate him. If you want to go back into the archive of somebody who just go back and watch him in college and understand why he was a tough eval because he ran so much RPO gimmick stuff, was like Dak Prescott and Dan Mullen's offense. Go back and watch Dak at Mississippi State play Alabama. That game's on YouTube for everybody to watch. And just look at how different he looks in college than how he would be used in the NFL and why that made him a hard eval, right? But that's not the case with Jalen Milroe. He played a more traditional NFL-style offense pretty much all 3 years in his college career. And I think he did better with Tommy Rees than he did with Kalen DeBoer, who was a little bit more on the RPO side, but not really a ton there either. So I don't think that perception of him is correct. Another thing that I think is a misconception with a tweet like this is the misunderstanding of like Kevin wanting to move away from the RPO. I think that's one of the things Kevin desperately wants to add to his offense for a number of reasons, right? The main reason being, if you look at the fundamentals for a West Coast offense and what everything in a West Coast offense is attempting to do, right? It's about putting mid-level defenders in conflict, and it's about manipulating where linebackers are on the field. That is what the West Coast style offense, that Kevin the Kubiak style, that is the majority of what you want to do. You want to manipulate safeties, you want to manipulate linebackers, you want to manipulate the middle of the field, and you want to use that space to open up wide passing lanes for quarterbacks to throw to. That's why it's one of those offenses where the barrier of entry for quarterback accuracy is very low, because you don't have to be super accurate. You're not asking a quarterback to sit there, diagnose like a true spread, and throw into tight windows. You're asking your quarterback to manipulate leverage, be smart with their eyes, and get the ball to where that leverage manipulates an open space in the field. So that is the concept that is everything that offense rotates around, right? It's not just getting under center or play action. It's the idea, the philosophy of moving linebackers, manipulating safeties. Now, there's a number of ways to do this. Play action is one of those ways. RPOs can do this, right? Read options can do this. But the number one thing that can manipulate linebackers and cause a lot of gravity with safeties and linebackers is an athletic quarterback. So knowing that these are the principles of what Kevin's offense is about, right? And understanding that it's not just about certain plays, it's more about why these concepts are in the playbook, because what they do at the core. These are the things that Kevin wants to accomplish offensively. He wants to move linebackers. He wants to move safeties to open up space. And that means that somebody like Jalen Milroe, who has that unreal athletic ability with their legs, has very real gravity that can move linebackers really easily, that can move safeties into the box really easily and create more lanes for you to throw through. That is the fundamental purpose of what they're trying to accomplish. And a quarterback with the skill set of Jalen Milroe helps you accomplish that goal. It might look a little bit different, but the end result in the objective is still the same. Again, it's another one where I can see how you can watch Jalen or get a glimpse of him from, highlights and think to yourself, how does this guy fit the Brown system? But it makes a lot of sense when you actually really think about it. Single out Dion because I thought Dion had a horrible take or anything. I singled him out because I think he was asking these questions in good faith. And these are questions that a lot of Browns fans have about Jalen Milroe, and I think it deserves a bit of an answer. So this is my attempt at giving this stuff an answer. So if you want to know how Jalen Milroe is a fit for the Browns offense, well, continue to watch this video, because that's what this video is going to be about. I think, in my personal opinion, why I feel like Jalen Milroe is a fit, and I could be wrong on this, but why I feel like he is a fit is for three different levels, right? There's a football reason, there's a schematic reason, and there's a personality reason. I think the personality stuff has to be addressed first, because if you don't feel like somebody has the personality to thrive in your workspace, if you're the Cleveland Browns, then it doesn't really matter if the football fit or the talent fit matters, because if that person can't thrive in your workspace, then they're not going to thrive in your workspace. First end all be all first thing. Is this a guy you want to bring into the building, especially at the quarterback position where he's going to be looked at as a future leader? You're going to be giving this guy a fast lane to being the face of the team if he can live up to that on the field. So the personality fit stuff, it matters. Now, when you look at the Browns locker room and what they want from their locker room, right? Kevin is a big, small bark, big bite guy. That's his big saying in the locker room, right? He doesn't want a lot of barking, but he wants a big bite. And I think the perfect example of what the Browns want to cultivate culturally in that locker room is Nick Chubb, right? Somebody who doesn't talk much, somebody who is not going to give you a crazy quote, somebody who's going to work ridiculously hard and put that work on the football field. Does Jalen Milroe fit that personality? I think from everything we can tell right now, right? I'm not on the ground in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, asking people who really, really know Jalen Milroe. So I have limited information here, but from everything I can gather from people who have been in Tuscaloosa, have covered the Alabama Crimson Tide, have talked to Jalen Milroe and his folks, they feel like he is a really, really hard worker, really disciplined guy, comes in super early, right? Truly the first guy in, last guy out kind of stuff. You can tell from just how he looks physically that he is dedicated to his workout plan, most certainly. You see the SEC graduate sign on his shoulder. He's third year in college. He got a master's degree in 3 years. It's pretty impressive. He was a academic Heisman candidate, which is really impressive, right? Not just going to school to play football, but also taking the school part of it seriously. And let's be real, Jalen Milroe runs 4.3. He's ran 4.3 his whole life. He never had a real reason to ever take school seriously, but he still took that challenge and ran with it, right? No pun intended. But that's what Jalen Milroe's personality seems to be off the field, from what we can tell. That seems to be a match for the Cleveland Browns, who are looking for guys who aren't going to, talk a lot of a gang of stuff, but they put it into their work. They work really hard. They're disciplined. They show up. That's what the Browns want to cultivate. He makes a ton of sense personality-wise. So you look at the personality fit with Jalen Milroe, it makes a ton of sense. Now let's get to the football fit, which is where I think Jalen Milroe is the most misunderstood prospect of this draft class, because everybody has spent every waking moment telling you how much of a project Jalen Milroe is without really breaking down what that means and why they feel like he's a project. I feel like he got labeled early on in the process as the project guy, and that's really shaped how a lot of people have talked about him and how people view him, but I don't know if it paints a representative picture of what Jalen Milroe is as a prospect. I've stated this for a while. I'm higher on Jalen Milroe's floor than most people, but I'm lower on Jalen Milroe's ceiling than most people. A lot of people will tell you he could be Lamar Jackson. I'll tell you this right now. Ain't no chance he's going to be Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was natural as a passer, was start-stoppy as a runner. There's never going to be that guy in Jalen Milroe. That's not what Jalen Milroe can offer you, but it could look like Colin Kaepernick did at his peak, right? His floor, a lot of people tell you his floor is awful. I think he's a good football player. I think he understands how to play football, whether he's running the ball or throwing the ball. He has a basic understanding of the game of football that like somebody like Kellen Mond never had, right? Or even like Anthony Richardson. He has a better base understanding of football than like an Anthony Richardson did, right? And the book's still open on him. But people are a bit low on his floor. I'm high on his floor. I see no reason why Jalen Milroe, at worst, can't be what Justin Fields is. His athletic ability gives him a tremendous floor. We know that athletic ability at the quarterback position is the one thing guaranteed to give you a floor at the quarterback position in the NFL. It gave Josh Allen a floor that he could develop with. It gave Lamar Jackson a floor that he could develop with. It gave Jalen Hurts a floor that he could develop with, right? Hell, RG3 won Rookie of the Year over Andrew Luck, partly because he was just a superior athlete to Andrew Luck and could do more with his legs than Andrew Luck, despite Andrew Luck being one of the best young quarterbacks we've ever seen up to that point. Athleticism gives you a floor at the quarterback position. I know people tend to think of somebody as an athlete at the quarterback position. They think it's hypothetical, and they don't think it has anything to apply. But Jalen Milroe's athleticism is not hypothetical. It's not something we haven't seen him put to use at Alabama. He's put it to use very effectively. He's going to be able to put that athleticism to use in the NFL. His athletic ability translates to the NFL because he is a good enough athlete to be a great athlete in the NFL. So his floor to me is much higher than most people are thinking, but his ceiling to me is a little bit lower than a lot of people are thinking. I don't think he's going to be an elite quarterback. I don't think he has top 5 potential or anything like that, right? But I do think he can be somebody who can put your team in a position where if you surround him with a good wide receiver who can catch a 50-50 ball here and there, you can have a really, really good offense And if you have a really, really good defense to go with that, you might got something there, right? Like, I think that's where Jalen Milroe sits here. Another thing that I feel like is misunderstood about Jalen Milroe is exactly where he does struggle as a passer and where he doesn't struggle as a passer. Most people just look at him and go, he's just a bad passer. He sucks at passing the ball. And they just leave that analysis there. But passing the ball is so much more complicated than just saying somebody can't throw the ball. Like, what passes can't they throw? Where are they strong in the middle of the field? It wouldn't be good enough for me to sit here and tell you that a prospect is a good passer of the football. If I just said that as a justification for a quarterback, some of you guys hopefully would call bullshit on that, because you can't just describe somebody as a good passer and leave it at that. You got to describe what they're good at. Are they an accurate passer? Are they really talented with arm strength? It's a more nuanced conversation. And yet when it comes to Jalen Milroe, it just starts and ends with he can't throw. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The conversation is far more nuanced than that. Jalen Milroe has things that he's really good at as a passer. He has things he's not very good at as a passer, like any other quarterback. And I think because we've talked about it so lazily with him, it's just painted this picture of a dude who barely throws the football. That's not the case. He is the most disciplined in the pocket of all of these quarterbacks in this draft class, in my opinion. Maybe Will Howard gives him a little bit of a run for his money, but other than that, this dude is insanely disciplined in the pocket, or at least demonstrated that in this last season, right? I think that was one of his points of emphasis going from 2023 to 2024. If you listen to the numbers of podcasts that he has done, and he's mentioned that he wanted to get better in the pocket going from 2023 to 24, you can see it. He was way, way more disciplined. He was probably the most disciplined guy in this draft class. When you look at quarterbacks who are hit while throwing the football, right? So it means they stood in the pocket, threw a football while they were getting hit. Jalen Milroe has 7 plays where he was hit as throwing. That's 3 times as much as Shedeur Sanders. And it's more than Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward combined. And before y'all go there, it's not because he was scrambling a ton. He wasn't really scrambling a ton, because his time to throw wasn't very high even when pressured, right? Like, that's him standing in the pocket, and you can see this in his film, making a decision and trying to step through the pocket and throw the football. That is not something you see a ton on Cam Ward's tape. You see it a little bit with Shedeur Sanders, but it is pocket discipline that I wish those 2 prospects had that Jalen Milroe does have, right? Another thing I think makes him a fit for the Browns offense is he has a preference to be in structure. He is not a natural improviser. I don't think he wants to naturally improvise. I think he wants to work within the structure of the offense. And for what the Browns want to do, it is much more suited for a quarterback with that preference. And here's the other part. He wants to get rid of the damn ball, right? He's not somebody who wants to hold the ball. His time to throw when clean, under pressure, and blitz are amongst the lowest in this draft class. He wants to be decisive. Sometimes he gets in his own head and he overthinks it and he's not very decisive. But for the most part, when he's in rhythm, in flow, he's very decisive. Holding the ball is deaf in this system. That's why he doesn't do it, right? He doesn't hold the ball a ton. Has to improve with his decision. He has to improve with his decisiveness and sometimes his decision making. He has to get a little bit better there, but the bones of where he's at, the foundation, is pretty strong. And the pocket discipline is where I like the most about Jalen Milroe as a passer, because how many times have I complained and sat here on film breakdowns and talked about how quarterbacks are overblowing their tackles, giving their tackles extra depth, blowing their tackle depth, allowing edges to get around their tackles or have free lanes on their tackles and putting their tackles in tough time. That has happened a ton with Deshaun Watson. It happened a ton with Baker Mayfield. When you watch Jalen Milroe's tape, sometimes to a fault, he plants in that pocket. Like, he gets to his last step and he plants, and he's not drifting left or right. He's not rolling prematurely. He's planting in that pocket. Maybe he's going to step up and around to try to run the ball, but he's not going to dilly-dally in the pocket. I think that's a good thing. You know, I'd rather deal with that than somebody who has these habits of wanting to roll out or seeing ghosts in the pocket. You could say a lot about Jalen Milroe, but in the pocket at least, he does not see very many ghosts, and he's not afraid of ghosts. He'll take the hit in the middle, and he doesn't mind it. And look, he got tested last year because 2023 had a pretty good offensive line. This last year at Alabama, that offensive line was not good. It was not very good. And he took less sacks this year than he did when he had the good offensive line. He has made a habit of getting better at this, and you can see it tangibly on tape. He is the least fidgety in the pocket of all of the prospects that we talk about being in that first, second round conversation. All of these traits are traits consistent with quarterbacks who can work with the system. Will it look a little bit different with Jalen Milroe? Yes, I would agree with you. But that doesn't mean that Jalen Milroe isn't a fit. And I would argue the Browns and Kevin Stefanski want it to look a little bit different going forward because they realize like you can only go so far with the offense that only Joe Flacco can run, right? Like you can only go so far with the offense that college isn't really producing new athletes for. The league has moved on. Football has moved on from running the pure Kubiak system. You have to adapt, and this is part of adapting. It's a natural evolution of the West Coast offense to start to prefer quarterbacks who can run because of what the West Coast offense is trying to accomplish. That is a huge part of it. Jalen Milroe fits those West Coast tendencies. You want a quarterback who's going to get the ball out. He's going to want to get the ball out on time and work in structure. That's what Jalen Milroe strives to be as a passer. He's not trying to come out here and look like Cam Newton or look like, Deshaun Watson, where he's holding the ball and trying to wait for stuff to happen and play make that way in a way that Cam Ward does. He wants to be on time. He wants to work on structure. He wants to be in structure. He wants to throw with anticipation, even though he doesn't do a great job of that. He wants to do all of the things that are principal in the Stefanski offense, which makes a ton of sense for the Browns to go after him. Another thing I want to make the point of, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, I think people have overestimated the level of project that Jalen Milroe is, but have underestimated the level of project of his peers. Think about this. His pressure to sack rate, right, is identical to Cam Ward when pressure. Now, Cam Ward gets a lot of love for his insane ability to be able to shake from pressure and avoid sacks. Well, according to this number, Jalen Milroe does that at the exact same rate as Cam Ward. And I would most certainly win the argument if I said that Jalen Milroe is certainly a better athlete than Cam Ward while being able to do that. Arm talent-wise, Jalen Milroe is number 2 in this class. I think it's clear cut he's number 2 in this class. He has the second best arm in this draft class. Cam Ward has the best. There's no doubt about that. But Jalen Milroe is number 2. He can't throw from as many platforms as Cam Ward, but he can throw the ball as hard and as far as Cam Ward can. I've talked about it. I think he has better discipline in the pocket, or at least better habits. He is less flighty and fidgety in the pockets than a lot of these other quarterbacks. He's also 22. I believe he's the youngest quarterback available to be drafted in this class right now, a whole year younger than Shador and Cam. And I would ask people, hey, is Jalen Milroe at 22 at a better place than Cam Ward and Shador were at 22? I would argue the answer is yes, because Jalen Milroe has accomplished some things that you're still waiting for not for Jalen, but for Cam Ward and Shador to do, right? Jalen Milroe has won some giant games in college football against some of the best competition in college football. I cannot point to a Cam Ward game where he's beaten an elite team in college football. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he did that at Washington State. But while at Miami, he didn't do that. I can't point to a Shador Sanders game in college football where he's beaten an elite team. I can point to like 7 games for Jalen Milroe where he went up against LSU. He went up against LSU again. He beat Georgia. He beat Georgia again. He beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. He almost beat Michigan the year they won the national championship game. Came within 1 play of beating Michigan and was the only team that challenged Michigan in their playoff run to that championship game. He has big time throws versus Vanderbilt down on the road. He has big time throws versus the best secondary in college football this year, South Carolina, right? Like, he has these moments versus elite competition that you don't really have for Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. Not saying that makes Jalen Milroe a better prospect than Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, but this idea that he's such a different project than those two guys, I feel like discounts the fact that Jalen played much better competition and had to play much better competition. While as his career progressed, Alabama got worse and worse because of the of Nick Saban leaving and what NIL did to Alabama. He is the best athlete in this class at the quarterback position. There's not even a close argument for who could be number 2 there. His floor, I think, is raised because of that athletic ability, and he's demonstrated that he's not a hypothetical athlete, right? This isn't Anthony Schwartz. Oh, yeah, he runs 4.29, but have you ever seen him do it? No, you watch Jalen Milroe play, and you're like, I think he's more athletic than he tested, right? He knows how to use those athletic skills at an elite level. And again, versus elite competition. Another thing I would like to add is that Jalen Milroe, of all of the quarterbacks in this class, he had the ability to not just take over a game against elite competition, but to take over a game to a point where it became a blowout. Like Jalen Milroe did that on multiple occasions at Alabama, where he's playing LSU, he's playing Georgia, he's playing, a top SEC team, and there's nothing they can do with him. Now, he wasn't consistent, which is why he's not going to be a first-round pick or early first-round pick, and he has to fix his accuracy, and that's something we could talk about in a couple of minutes. But he was able to dominate at times in college football. When it was on for Jalen Milroe, it was nothing anybody in the SEC could do about it, right? Not to say that Cam Ward didn't have moments where he dominated, but it wasn't that same level of domination. The same can be said for Shedeur Sanders. His decision-making isn't on par with Shedeur or Will Howard, but it's closer to Shedeur and Will Howard in that range to where like Cam Ward is, where I think Cam Ward's not a great decision maker like most of the time. So I don't think he's a bad decision maker. I think he needs to be refined in his decision making and his mechanics. Yes, I agree. They need work, and I think his mechanics definitely affected his accuracy in college. But keep in mind that while we can acknowledge this with Jalen Milroe and acknowledge that he needs to fix his mechanics because he wasn't super accurate in college, consider this. Corey Kinnon did a weighted on target project, and he recently published another piece to that weighted on target project where he takes out all of the G5 and FCS games out of all the players he charted, right? And what he's doing with weighted on target, he's watching the film and he's pointing out where these quarterbacks are making accurate throws, whether they're completed or not, right? Is the throw going where it's supposed to be? Jalen Milroe is at 60% of weighted on target. Means 60% of the time when he throws the ball, it goes where it's supposed to go. Not a great number. Needs to improve. But consider this. Cam Ward's only at 61%. Now, we don't talk about Cam Ward as a project as a passer. We don't talk about how Cam Ward needs to improve his accuracy. But these guys are separated by 1 percentage point. And keep in mind, Cam Ward's Power 4 games are against the ACC, against like Duke, Louisville. Like, these are good schools, but these aren't the SEC. So he's less accurate. He's just as accurate as Jalen Milroe, but against worse competition than Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe's just as accurate as Cam Ward, but he's playing teams that consistently put first-round picks in the secondary to the NFL. That's something worth considering. Like, how much of a project is Jalen Milroe really if we're not going to consider Cam Ward a project? If we're not going to consider Shedeur Sanders a project, where the big concern with him is, hey, man, is he athletic enough to play in the NFL? There are a number of reasons why I think Jalen Milroe to be a fit, whether it be his personality and why I think that matches what the Browns want, his football fit and what he wants to do as a football player, what he wants to accomplish as a football player, and what the Browns want to accomplish with him, whether it be the idea that the Browns offense is growing, that they're not just trying to go back to the old thing. They're going to incorporate some of the stuff that was successful with Kevin in 2020 and 2021 and 2023. But they also want to add new elements. That's why they didn't bring back Alex Van Pelt and they went for Tommy Rees, somebody new. They want to add the RPO. They want to add read option to this game. They want to use the quarterback as a run threat because that helps the Browns do what they want to do in the passing game even more. All of these reasons combine for why I feel like Jalen Milroe is a unique fit for the Cleveland Browns. And I think if you ask Jalen Milroe himself, he would suggest that he is a unique fit for the Cleveland Browns himself. And I really do wonder if Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees would consider that to be the same thing. Also, I do find it funny that people have convinced themselves that the one team that's not a fit for Jalen Milroe is the only team in the NFL that employs one of his coaches, a coach that he got to a national championship game with on offense. So all of this boils into one ball. And that ball tells me that I feel like Jalen Milroe has a good chance of being a fit for the Cleveland Browns. Now, will he live up to it? Will he be able to play? That's a whole different question. But do I think he is a fit? Do I think drafting him makes sense? Absolutely. That's why I think it makes sense. We'll see what they actually do. But if you're asking my opinion and why I think this is a fit, like the guy on the tweet earlier, that's why. Y'all let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have you a better night. Peace.